Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
First of all today, Donald Trump is due to give a speech to the gathering of global business and political leaders in the Swiss resort of Davos later today. He'll be talking about free trade after yesterday predicting a tremendous increase in UK-US trade post-Brexit. He's also apologised for retweeting messages from the far-right group Britain First last November. Here he is speaking to Piers Morgan on ITV.
It was done because I am a big believer in fighting radical Islamic terror. This was a depiction of radical Islamic terror.
But they were unverified videos. At least one of them was not what it seemed.
They are, but this was, I didn't do it. I didn't go out and I did a retweet. I don't want to cause any difficulty for your country, that I can tell you.
Can I get an apology out of you just for the retweets of
Well, if you're telling me,
I think it would go a long way.
Then here's what's fair. If you're telling me there's a horrible people, horrible racist people, I would certainly apologize if you'd like me to do that. I know nothing about them.
And you would disavow yourself of people like that?
I don't want to be involved with people, but you're telling me about these people because I know nothing about these people.
Donald Trump there talking to Piers Morgan. Claire, what worried you more? The fact that he didn't, Donald Trump, know really what or who Britain First actually was and still obviously retweeted it, or the non-apology apology?
Well, first of all, I don't think that anybody knew who Britain First... Hardly anyone in the country knew who Britain First was until there was a major furore about this.
But should the President of the United States found out?
A small, minor, non-existent fascist organisation in this country are racist. I mean, people were saying, God, I didn't know they existed until he retweeted them and then we all found out. He's a retweet lunatic. It's not that, but I wouldn't say that that is the greatest crime that Trump has committed. And God knows, with so many people trigger-happy, retweeting all sorts of things for virtue-signalling reasons, he just seems to me like everybody else who doesn't always read what they retweet.
Except he's not everybody else, is he? I mean, he is the President of the United States and he's sitting in the White House. So I think it's reasonable to be, if not shocked anymore, because he's Donald Trump and his conception of the presidency is so different from anything we're used to before, at least very profoundly disappointed and alarmed that this person wields this power of communication, has the capacity to elevate Britain First from being a next to nothing, pathetic, small fascist organisation into something that, by definition, because he's the US president, the whole world knows about. But he has that power and he uses it so irresponsibly.
But he did apologise.
Well, he apologised for the existence of racism, if you listen to what he said. And I think it's pretty clear from everything else he's ever said that Donald Trump doesn't have a very clear definition of what racism is.
Just to also note, he wanted to be clear that he was against Islamic fundamentalist extremism, and that will have a popular resonance for more than Trump supporters.
Right, and this may, of course, overshadow the fact that I think we can show pictures of Donald Trump now arriving at Davos because he's going to be giving this speech very shortly. There he is, waving to the crowds, the President of the United States, because actually he talked about trade with Theresa May. Were you heartened, Claire, about his pledge to increase? There'll be a tremendous amount of trade, he said, between the UK and the US.
Well, everyone's going to be heartened about the possibility of greater trade deals.
Do you believe him?
That's a whole different ballgame. I mean, the difficulty is to know how seriously to take him as a president for the reasons that we've just indicated. Obviously, it's very important that Britain can do trade with America. There's a lot being made. There's a lot being made of his protectionism. In fact, there's protectionism coming from the EU to everyone else. There's a lot of that trend around. So any time that he is talking about, come on, let's do trade deals, we can be pleased about that. It's just this, do you believe him character bit? I think America-Britain trade deal's good. He is a person, and his integrity, obviously, one can be anxious about.
There's also another element to this, which is that we know from everything Donald Trump has said about the way he does any deals, but specifically also trade deals, that his understanding of a good deal is the one in which he, or the United States, or the person of Donald Trump, will walk away from the table entirely victorious and satisfied, and the other party in agreement is completely beaten and crushed and humiliated. That is the way he conceives any negotiation, and that is the way he conceives trade. Well, he sees it as a zero-sum game. So the fact that he thinks there'll be a great deal doesn't mean that's a good deal for the UK.
I think most people going into trade negotiations want the best deal for the people they represent. And you might say, well, he wants to humiliate people, but it would be ridiculous to go in and say you're going to have a good trade deal which we don't get a very good deal out of. And that's what he tries to do.
Briefly, please, the state visit looks like it's back on again, even if it is on the 31st of December 2018.
We're not entirely clear that it's a full state visit now, are we?
No, it could be
a working visit. I don't think the Prime Minister's in a massive hurry to have big parades down the mile, all the flags waving. I think they'll want to keep it quite low-key.
Caused great excitement amongst those who were anti-Trump, because now they've got the excuse for their demonstrations and people are still calling for him to be banned, and I think that that is an immature response to what it should just be simply a visit by the United States President and treated with due respect.
Right.
Even though I can't stand Trump, that's important.
We'll be revisiting this time and again, no doubt, before the visit that may or may not happen.
Mr. President, after you have been so warmly received yesterday here in Davos, it is now my great pleasure to officially welcome the President of the United States, Donald J. Trump, to the closing session of the World Economic Forum's annual meeting 2018. Mr. President, you cannot imagine how much we are looking forward to your speech. Not just the 3,000 leaders assembled here in Davos, but also the millions joining us globally, thanks to the presence of key media from around the world. Mr. President, on behalf of the business leaders here in the room, let me particularly congratulate you for the historic tax reform package passed last month, greatly reducing the tax burden of US companies, fostering job creation as well as stimulating economic growth in the United States, but also providing a tremendous boost to the global economy. Davos is the place where leaders of states and industry come and work together in the pursuit of global peace and prosperity. We live in an interdependent world where decisions made by one nation, particularly by the United States, impact all other countries. I believe that today we need to strike the right balance between the necessary rebuilding of national social contracts and at the same time strengthening our multilateral system to address critical issues such as trade, investment, terrorism, and migration, to name just a few. Mr. President, the role of the United States and your personal leadership is absolutely essential. For this reason, your message here has tremendous relevance. Of course, I'm aware that your strong leadership is open to misconceptions and biased interpretations. Therefore, it is so essential for us in the room to listen directly to you. This forum, as it has done for nearly 5 decades, should create a base for dialogue and global cooperation where, and I quote you, Mr. President, strong sovereign nations with different values, different cultures, and different dreams do not just coexist, but work side by side on the basis of mutual respect. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the 45th President of the United States, Donald J. Trump, to the stage.
Thank you, Klaus, very much. It's a privilege to be here at this forum where leaders in business, science, art, diplomacy, and world affairs have gathered for many, many years to discuss how we can advance prosperity, security, and peace. I'm here today to represent the interests of the American people and to affirm America's friendship and partnership in building a better world. Like all nations represented at this great forum, America hopes for a future in which everyone can prosper and every child can grow up free from violence, poverty, and fear. Over the past year, we have made extraordinary strides in the U.S. We're lifting up forgotten communities, creating exciting new opportunities, and helping every American find their path to the American dream, the dream of a great job, a safe home, and a better life for their children. After years of stagnation, the United States is once again experiencing strong economic growth. The stock market is smashing one record after another and has added more than $7 trillion in new wealth since my election. Consumer confidence, business confidence, and manufacturing confidence are the highest they have been in many decades. Since my election, we've created 2.4 million jobs, and that number is going up very, very substantially. Small business optimism is at an all-time high. New unemployment claims are near the lowest we've seen in almost half a century. African-American unemployment has reached the lowest rate ever recorded in the United States, and so has unemployment among Hispanic Americans. The world is witnessing the resurgence of a strong and prosperous America. I'm here to deliver a simple message There has never been a better time to hire, to build, to invest, and to grow in the United States. America is open for business, and we are competitive once again. The American economy is by far the largest in the world, and we've just enacted the most significant tax cuts and reform in American history. We've massively cut taxes for the middle class and small businesses to let working families keep more of their hard-earned money. We lowered our corporate tax rate from 35% all the way down to 21%. As a result, millions of workers have received tax cut bonuses from their employers in amounts as large as $3,000. The tax cut bill is expected to raise the average American's household income by more than $4,000. The world's largest company, Apple, announced it plans to bring $245 billion in overseas profits home to America. Their total investment into the United States economy will be more than $350 billion over the next 5 years. Now is the perfect time to bring your business, your jobs, and your investments to the United States. This is especially true because we have undertaken the most extensive regulatory reduction ever conceived. Regulation is stealth taxation. The U.S., like many other countries, unelected bureaucrats, and we have, believe me, we have them all over the place, and they've imposed crushing and anti-business and anti-worker regulations on our citizens with no vote, no legislative debate, and no real accountability. In America, those days are over. I pledged to eliminate 2 unnecessary regulations for every 1 new regulation. We have succeeded beyond our highest expectations. Instead of 2 for 1, we have cut 22 burdensome regulations for every 1 new rule. We are freeing our businesses and workers so they can thrive and flourish as never before. We are creating an environment that attracts capital, invites investment, and rewards production. America is the place to do business. So come to America, where you can innovate, create, and build. I believe in America. As President of the United States, I will always put America first, just like the leaders of other countries should put their country first also. But America first does not mean America alone. When the United States grows, so does the world. American prosperity has created countless jobs all around the globe, and the drive for excellence, creativity, and innovation in the U.S. has led to important discoveries that help people everywhere live more prosperous and far healthier lives. As the United States pursues domestic reforms to unleash jobs and growth, we are also working to reform the international trading system so that it promotes broadly shared prosperity and rewards to those who play by the rules. We cannot have free and open trade if some countries exploit the system at the expense of others. We support free trade, but it needs to be fair and it needs to be reciprocal, because in the end, unfair trade undermines us all. The United States will no longer turn a blind eye to unfair economic practices, including massive intellectual property theft, industrial subsidies, and pervasive state-led economic planning. These and other predatory behaviors are distorting the global markets and harming businesses and workers, not just in the U.S., but around the globe. Just like we expect the leaders of other countries to protect their interests As President of the United States, I will always protect the interests of our country, our companies, and our workers. We will enforce our trade laws and restore integrity to our trading system. Only by insisting on fair and reciprocal trade can we create a system that works not just for the U.S., but for all nations. As I have said, the United States is prepared to negotiate mutually beneficial bilateral trade agreements with all countries. This will include the countries in TPP, which are very important. We have agreements with several of them already. We would consider negotiating with the rest, either individually or perhaps as a group, if it is in the interests of all. My administration is also taking swift action in other ways to restore American confidence and independence. We are lifting self-imposed restrictions on energy production to provide affordable power to our citizens and businesses and to promote energy security for our friends all around the world. No country should be held hostage to a single provider of energy. America is roaring back, and now is the time to invest in the future of America. We have dramatically cut taxes to make America competitive. We are eliminating burdensome regulations at a record pace. We are reforming the bureaucracy to make it lean, responsive, and accountable, and we are ensuring our laws are enforced fairly. We have the best colleges and universities in the world, and we have the best workers in the world. Energy is abundant and affordable. There has never been a better time to do business in America. We are also making historic investments in the American military because we cannot have prosperity without security. To make the world safer from rogue regimes, terrorism, and revisionist powers, we are asking our friends and allies to invest in their own defenses and to meet their financial obligations. Our common security requires everyone to contribute their fair share. My administration is proud to have led historic efforts at the United Nations Security Council and all around the world to unite all civilized nations in our campaign of maximum pressure to denuke the Korean Peninsula. We continue to call on partners to confront Iran's support for terrorists and block Iran's path to a nuclear weapon. We're also working with allies and partners to destroy jihadist terrorist organizations such as ISIS, and very successfully so. The United States is leading a very broad coalition to deny terrorists control of their territory and populations, to cut off their funding, and to discredit their wicked ideology. I am pleased to report that the coalition to defeat ISIS has retaken almost 100% of the territory once held by these killers in Iraq and Syria. There is still more fighting and work to be done and to consolidate our gains. We are committed to ensuring that Afghanistan never again becomes a safe haven for terrorists who want to commit mass murder to our civilian populations. I want to thank those nations represented here today that have joined in these crucial efforts. You are not just securing your own citizens, but saving lives and restoring hope for millions and millions of people. When it comes to terrorism, we will do whatever is necessary to protect our nation. We will defend our citizens and our borders. We are also securing our immigration system as a matter of both national and economic security. America is a cutting-edge economy, but our immigration system is stuck in the past. We must replace our current system of extended family chain migration with a merit-based system of admissions that selects new arrivals based on their ability to contribute to our economy. to support themselves financially and to strengthen our country. In rebuilding America, we are also fully committed to developing our workforce. We are lifting people from dependence to independence because we know the single best anti-poverty program is a very simple and very beautiful paycheck. To be successful, it is not enough to invest in our economy. We must invest in our people. When people are forgotten, the world becomes fractured. Only by hearing and responding to the voices of the forgotten can we create a bright future that is truly shared by all. The nation's greatness is more than the sum of its production. A nation's greatness is the sum of its citizens, the values, pride, love, devotion, and character of the people who call that nation home. From my first international G7 summit, to the G20, to the UN General Assembly, to APEC, to the World Trade Organization, and today at the World Economic Forum, my administration has not only been present, but has driven our message that we are all stronger when free, sovereign nations cooperate toward shared goals, and they cooperate toward shared dreams. Represented in this room are some of the remarkable citizens from all over the world. You are national leaders, business titans, industry giants, and many of the brightest minds in many fields. Each of you has the power to change hearts, transform lives, and shape your country's destinies. With this power comes an obligation, however, a duty of loyalty to the people, workers, and customers who have made you who you are. So together, let us resolve to use our power, our resources, and our voices, not just for ourselves, but for our people, to lift their burdens, to raise their hopes, and to empower their dreams, to protect their families, their communities, their histories, and their futures. That's what we're doing in America, and the results are totally unmistakable. It's why new businesses and investment are flooding in. It's why our unemployment rate is the lowest it's been in so many decades. It's why America's future has never been brighter. Today, I am inviting all of you to become part of this incredible future we are building together. Thank you to our hosts. Thank you to the leaders and innovators in the audience. But most importantly, thank you to all of the hardworking men and women who do their duty each and every day, making this a better world for everyone. Together, let us send our love and our gratitude to make them, because they really make our countries run. They make our countries great. Thank you, and God bless you all. Thank you very much.
So, President Donald Trump there, giving the keynote speech at the World Economic Forum in Davos, pretty much stuck to script, and it's what we were expecting to hear from the trails that we got before he spoke, talking a lot about trade, saying after years of stagnation, America is now showing strong economic growth. He also criticised some countries for exploiting the system of free trade, saying that the US will no longer turn a blind eye to unfair trade.
Yes, President Trump describing America as being open for business, saying to global partners, come to America. I will always put America first, but putting America first does not mean America alone.
We weren't expecting the president to take questions, but it looks like that might be happening. Let's go back.
Well, first of all, Klaus, I want to congratulate you. This is an incredible group of people. We had dinner last night with about 15 leaders of industry, none of whom I knew, but all of whom I've read about for years, and it was truly an incredible group. But I think I have 15 new friends. So this has been really great what you've done in putting it together, the Economic Forum. The tax reform was a dream of a lot of people over many years, but they weren't able to get it done. Many people tried. And Ronald Reagan was really the last to make a meaningful cut and reform, and ours is cutting and reforming. We emphasize cut, but the reform is probably almost as important. We've wanted to do it. It is very tough politically to do it. Hard to believe that would be, but it is very, very tough. That's why it hasn't been done in close to 40 years. And once we got it going, it was going, and the big, and I wouldn't say a total surprise, but one of the big things that happened and took place is AT&T and some others came out very early and they said they were going to pay thousands and thousands of dollars to people that work for their companies. And you have 300,000, 400,000, 500,000 people working for these companies. And all of a sudden it became like a big waterfall, a big, beautiful waterfall, where so many companies are doing it. And even today they just announced many more. But every day they announce more and more. And now it's a fight for who's going to give the most. It started at 1,000. Now we have them up to 3,000. This is something that we didn't anticipate. Oftentimes in business, things happen that you don't anticipate. Usually that's a bad thing. But this was a good thing. This came out of nowhere. Nobody ever thought of this as a possibility even. It wasn't in the equation. We waited, we said, wait till February 1st when the checks start coming in. And people, Klaus, have a lot more money in their paycheck. Because it's not just a little money. There's a lot of money for people making a living doing whatever they may be doing. And we really thought February 1st it was going to kick in and everybody was going to be, well, we haven't even gotten there yet. And it's kicked in. And it's had an incredible impact on the stock market and the stock prices. We've set 84 records since my election, record stock market prices, meaning we hit new highs 84 different times out of a one-year period. And that's a great thing. And in all fairness, that was done before we passed the tax cuts and tax reform. So what happened is really something special. Then, as you know, and as I just said, Apple came in with $350 billion. And I tell you, I spoke with Tim Cook. I said, Tim, I will never consider this whole great run that we've made complete until you start building plants in the U.S. And I will tell you, this moved up very substantially. But when I heard 350, I thought they were talking $350 million. And by the way, that's a nice sized plant. Not the greatest, but not bad. And they said, no, sir, it's $350 billion. I said, that is something. Well, we have tremendous amounts of money, including my newfound friends from last night, great companies. They're all investing. When one of the gentlemen said he's putting in $2 billion because of the tax cuts, I said to myself, wow, he's actually the cheap one in the group because they're putting in massive numbers of billions of dollars. So I think you have a brand new United States. You have a United States where people from all over the world are looking to come in and invest. And there's just nothing like what's happening. And I just want to finish by, I have a group of people that have been so out, so I have a whole lot of them, so I won't introduce because then I'll insult at least half of them. But I've had a group of people that work so hard on this and other things. And we're really doing, we had a great first year, so successful in so many different ways. And there's a tremendous spirit when you look at all of the different charts and polls, and you see, as an example, African-American unemployment at the historic low. It's never had a period of time like this. Same with Hispanic. Women at a 17-year low. It's very heartwarming to see, but there's a tremendous spirit in the United States. I would say it's a spirit like I have never witnessed before. I've been here for a while. I have never witnessed the spirit that our country has right now. So I just want to thank you all and all of those that are pouring billions of dollars into our country or $10 into our country. We thank you very much. Thank you.
Mr. President, I will ask you maybe a personal question, but before doing so, I just
sounds very interesting.
Acknowledge.
I didn't know about this one.
I would like to acknowledge the strong presence of your cabinet members here, who tremendously contributed to the discussions.
Good.
The last
I would like to do that. That's very good.
Yeah. Now,
Stephen, Wilbur, Gary, Robert, even my general and my various other generals, you know, we're making our military protection a little bit better for us too. So thank you very much. Does everybody understand that? I think so. Thank you all for being here.
Now, my maybe personal question would be, what experience from your past have been most useful in preparing you for the presidency?
Well, being a business, I've always loved business. I've always been good at building things, and I've always been very successful at making money. I'd buy things that would fail, that would be failures, and I'd turn them around and try and get them for the right price, and then I'd turn them around and make them successful. And I've been good at it, and that takes a certain ability. And, you know, historically, I guess there's never really been a businessman or business person elected president. It's always been a general or a politician. Throughout history, it's always been a general. You had to be a general, but mostly it was politicians. You never have a businessman. And then, in all fairness, I was saying to Klaus last night, had the opposing party to me won, some of whom you backed, some of the people in the room, instead of being up almost 50%, the stock market is up since my election almost 50%. Rather than that, I believe the stock market from that level, the initial level, would have been down close to 50%. That's where we were heading. I really believe that, because they were going to put on massive new regulations. You couldn't breathe. It was choking our country to death. And I was able to see that, Klaus, as a business person. The other thing is I've always seemed to get, for whatever reason, a disproportionate amount of press or media. And throughout my whole life, somebody will explain someday why, but I've always gotten a lot. And as a businessman, I was always treated really well by the press. You know, the numbers speak and things happen, but I've always really had a very good press. And it wasn't until I became a politician that I realized how nasty, how mean, how vicious, and how fake the press can be as the cameras start going off in the back. But overall, I mean, the bottom line, somebody said, well, they couldn't have been that bad because here we are, we're president. And I think we're doing a really great job with my team. I have a team of just tremendous people. And I think we're doing a very special job. And I really believe it was time. And it was time to do that job, because I don't think the United States would have done very well if it went through 4 or 8 more years of regulation and really a very anti-business group of people. We have a very pro-business group. We have regulations cut to a level. In the history of our country, Klaus, this was reported recently, in 1 year, we've cut more regulations in my administration than any other administration in 4, 8, or 16 years in the one case. We've cut more regulations in 1 year, and we have a ways to go. I mean, we're probably 50% done, and we're going to have regulation. There's nothing wrong with rules and regulations. You need them. But we've cut more than any administration ever in the history of our country, and we still have a ways to go. So I think between that and the tremendous tax cuts, we've really done something. And one other thing I said, and I saw it last night with some of the leaders and the business people, I think I've been a cheerleader for our country. And everybody representing a company or a country has to be a cheerleader, or no matter what you do, it's just not going to work. And the reason I'm a cheerleader is because it's easy, because I love our country, and I think we're just doing really well. And we look forward to seeing you in America, special place, and where you are is a special place also. Thank you all very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. President, for being with us. The World Economic Forum community who is assembled here will be certainly, and I quote you from the last piece of your remarks, will be certainly be among the hard-working men and women who do their duty each and every day making this world a better place for everyone. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you.
President Donald Trump there addressing questions at the World Economic Forum after his keynote speech there to global leaders, in which he described America as being open for business, America first, but that does not mean America alone. Well, for reaction to that speech, we're joined now by Sky's US correspondent Cordelia Lynch, who is in Washington for us now. Cordelia, a restrained President Trump there delivering that speech, that scripted speech. His message seemed to be very much one of America open for business. We have shared values with our global partners. We want you to come to America to do business with us, but it will be on our terms.
Absolutely. I think to some extent we saw the twin Trumps there. It was a scripted, non-ad-libbed performance. I think he spoke for around 15 minutes, and it didn't really feel that he went off the track or off cuff in any respect, really. He stuck to the message that they really wanted to hammer home, which was America is open for business. There has never been a better time to invest in America. Fewer regulations, lower taxes. Then, of course, we also saw a less scripted performance when he took unexpected questions, when he couldn't avoid a bit of a stinging rebuke to the global elite that he lambasted through the campaign. Now, of course, they're all listening intently to his message, and he wanted to reiterate that America and the markets have done very well under his presidency. But look, I think the administration and his advisors will be very happy with his performance. This was the very event that he spurned last year, and now we saw him really touting what has been a massive tax overhaul, something that he believes he should be able to celebrate. He's slashed, of course, the corporate tax rate. The whole purpose of this trip to Davos was ultimately to sell America. And he looked like he was enjoying himself, really. This is not really expected to be a meeting of minds, these top CEOs, the kind of globalist message that we have seen him really separate himself from. And yet he clearly recognized that this was a chance to really share his global economic message, to get people behind America first, but not America alone. Really a kind of globalist sensibility that he was sharing there, a sharp departure from the kind of rhetoric that we heard on the campaign trail. And I think really ultimately they'll be quite pleased with his performance as a result of it. Quite a different Donald Trump than we have heard for some months. There are, of course, the defectors, those that are forced or feel the need to go it alone. There's the Pacific Rim Pact. We've seen the likes of Justin Trudeau talk about the need to sort of rally the world in those trade agreements that Donald Trump has decided to desert. But this really was about rhetoric and about a call for unity. And on that, I think the administration will feel he delivered.
While you've been talking, we've had news through that the US economy grew at 2.6% in the fourth quarter, boosted by the best consumer spending since 2016. So sort of reinforcing there his message about the positive effect he has had from the US economy, being thanked there as well by the chairman of the World Economic Foundation for what he'd done with the US economy and what the repercussions would therefore be for the global economy as a consequence.
Yeah, and it's important. He'll, of course, be massively buoyed by that. It's something that we heard, and as he was taking questions after that scripted speech, that he was keen to tout, and it matters with voters as well. As I travel across the country, the one thing people keep coming back to, despite perhaps reservations about his tenor, his behaviour, is the economy. And that's what the administration, when you're in the background briefings, when you're speaking to advisors, they want to keep coming back to. They know when it comes to the midterms, to 2020, I know that sounds a long way away, is that this is a president that's kind of open for business, that's ultimately going to get more money in the back of your pocket and is residing over a very good period for employment as well. So despite reservations about his foreign policy, despite the ongoing revelations about the Russia investigation, more news breaking overnight, this is the kind of central platform that helped get him elected and that he hopes will keep him in power for a second term.
Cordelia, thank you.
Donald Trump has told an audience of business and political leaders that his mantra of America first doesn't mean America alone. Speaking at the World Economic Forum in Davos in Switzerland, Mr. Trump said the US was doing fantastically well and was open for business. But he hit out at what he called other countries' predatory trading practices. Earlier, the president said he was prepared to apologise for sharing social media posts by the far-right Britain First group. Our North America editor John Sopel is in Davos this evening. John.
Rita, it is a very rare thing for the US president to come to Davos, and a year ago it would have been unthinkable for Donald Trump to have turned up here. After all, this is the home of the 1%, the elite and the globalists, the very people that he railed against during his presidential election campaign. But something funny has happened over the past couple of days. He seemed to quite like them, and they seem to quite like him. Wherever Donald Trump has gone in Davos, the crowds have gone with him. And wherever the cameras have been, the president has been pleased to oblige.
I hope we're going to bring back many billions of dollars into the U.S. I think that'll happen. It's already happening. But billions of dollars is coming back into the U.S., and I think that'll just continue.
How much today? How much?
Probably a lot.
And that was the theme of his speech. America first, yes, but an America welcoming the world.
I will always put America first, just like the leaders of other countries should put their country first also. But America first does not mean America alone. When the United States grows, so does the world.
But at the end of a week in which the US imposed extra charges on some imported goods from China, he played down talk of a trade war. Nevertheless, there was a warning.
We cannot have free and open trade if some countries exploit the system at the expense of others. We support free trade, but it needs to be fair and it needs to be reciprocal. Because in the end, unfair trade undermines us all.
Some stood to applaud, but it wasn't the ovation given to President Xi of China last year. This hasn't been a complete meeting of minds, but then again, it was never going to be. That said, Donald Trump has been more conciliatory than many would have expected, and the audience have reacted more warmly. It may be that Davos 2018 turns out to be a win-win. And the president was in conciliatory, almost repentant mood over those Britain First anti-Muslim retweets from last year that brought him to blows with the Prime Minister.
Here's what's fair. If you're telling me there's a horrible people, horrible racist people, I would certainly apologize if you'd like me to do that. I know nothing about them.
So yes, he would apologise. He just didn't actually say sorry. The president has now left the Swiss Alps, and if not yet a fully paid-up member of the Davos set, he'll probably be invited back. There's a lot they liked about what Donald Trump said, and who would disagree with his central message, that a booming US economy is good for the global economy. John Sopel, BBC News, Davos.
Asked bluntly in an exclusive ITV interview to apologise for retweeting hard-right messages, President Trump wriggled. He said he knew nothing about Britain First, but told Good Morning Britain's Piers Morgan if they are horrible, racist people, then he would apologise, if you'd like me to. He also told delegates at the World Economic Forum in Switzerland there was no better time to do business with the United States, but And no equivocation here, he remained firmly committed to putting America first. More on that in a moment, but first, Juliette Bremner on an apology of sorts.
Mr. President.
I've missed you.
How are you?
This was obviously a meeting of old friends, but it didn't mean the president would escape some awkward questions when he appeared on ITV's Good Morning Britain. His decision to retweet posts from the far-right group Britain First horrified many in this country, who criticised his apparent endorsement of derogatory anti-Muslim videos.
It was done because I am a big believer in fighting radical Islamic terror. This was a depiction of radical Islamic
But they were
terror.
unverified videos. At least one of them was not what it seemed.
They are, but this was, I didn't do it. I didn't go out and I did a retweet. It was a big story where you are, but it was not a big story where I am.
I get that.
If you're telling me there's a horrible people, horrible racist people, I would certainly apologize if you'd like me to do that.
Fighting back! Jada Franson, here on the right, claims Britain First was misrepresented. Others feel the apology had to be dragged from the president. The Labour MP Jo Cox was murdered by a man who shouted Britain First as he attacked her. For her family, the apology lacked sincerity.
I think if this were an aberration and this was the first time the president had said something like that, I think I probably would accept the apology, even as caveated as it was. But I think the issue with the president is he is fairly consistent in his bigotry towards different groups, whether that's Mexicans or Muslims or migrants.
The Prime Minister condemned the retweets as wrong, but judging by yesterday's meeting, she's now happy to move on.
We actually have a very good relationship, although a lot of people think we don't. I support her. I support a lot of what she does and a lot of what she says. I am a tremendous supporter of the UK.
His mission in Davos is to promote America, but the tone's been surprisingly conciliatory. A working visit to Britain now back on the agenda. Juliette Bremner, ITV News.
And you can watch the full Piers Morgan interview with President Trump here on ITV on Sunday at 10 p.m. Mr. Trump's address to the World Economic Forum in Davos this afternoon was the first by a US president in nearly 20 years. He used it to explain what his America First policy meant, saying the US was open for business but insisting that it had to be fair and reciprocal. Well, our business editor, Joel Hills, was there listening. What else did he say, Joel?
Well, look, Alistair, the World Economic Forum wants to improve the state of the world. President Trump swept into the conference room today with a different philosophy, America First. But America First, he said, was not America alone. He wants free trade. He wants foreign investment. But he warned his audience that he would not hesitate to act to continue to protect America's interests.
We cannot have free and open trade if some countries exploit the system at the expense of others. The United States will no longer turn a blind eye to unfair economic practices.
And how did that message go down, Joel?
Well, that last comment was seen as being aimed at China. I thought that his speech was pretty softly spoken for Trump, actually. There was plenty of boasting, of course, about the booming American economy. He said he could take the credit for that. There were boos and hisses too, Alistair, at one point when he accused the media of being mean and vicious. That very rarely happens at Davos. And afterwards, one or two people in the room did say they saw signs of trouble.
Building things, and I've always been very
exactly as expected. Just his stock America First speech, advocating deregulation, which really is worrying for us if we're going into trade agreements with him.
Look, the expectation today was that this speech would be pretty confrontational. In the end, it absolutely wasn't. President Trump, in many ways, appeared to be reaching out, even in this remote part of the world, and building bridges, albeit in his own way.
Joel, thank you.
An apology of sorts from Donald Trump, and that doesn't happen often. In a television interview with Piers Morgan, the president said he would apologise for retweeting a series of videos by a British far-right group, insisting he knew nothing about them. Mr. Trump was speaking from the Swiss resort of Davos, where he's been taking his America First message to the political and economic elite. And their reaction has been distinctly mixed, as Porrick O'Brien reports.
All the world's a stage, and one man in his time plays many parts. Today, Donald Trump's part, cheerleader-in-chief for the booming American economy. For the self-proclaimed nemesis of the elite, he fitted right in at Davos, gave a solid speech. The message, global elite, come do business in America.
I'm here to deliver a simple message. There has never been a better time to hire, to build, to invest, and to grow in the United States. America is open for business, and we are competitive once again.
President Trump was working the less regulation, less tax for business script, and it went down well. You have to rewind to backstage before the main act, though, to go off script.
Did you try and fire Robert Mueller?
Thank you. Thank you.
Reacting to questions about a New York Times story today that the president ordered the firing of special counsel Robert Mueller last June, the man investigating Russian interference in the election, and whether or not the president's attempt to stymie the investigation amounts to obstruction of justice.
Did you fire Robert Mueller? Did you want to fire Robert Mueller?
Fake news, folks. Fake news.
What's your message today?
Typical New York Times fake stories.
Mr. Trump.
The New York Times reports that Trump ordered White House counsel Donald McGahn to fire Mueller, but that the lawyer refused to do so, saying he would quit instead. The president then, according to the report, backed off. The significance of this, it could be another piece of a very important jigsaw for the Mueller investigation itself. Proving obstruction of justice is difficult. You have to demonstrate a pattern of, quote, corrupt intent to obstruct an FBI investigation. The question now is, do all of these jigsaw puzzle pieces exist? And does Robert Mueller have them? Let's rewind again at Davos, even further back.
Mr. President.
I missed you.
How are you?
How are you? Hi, Piers. How are you?
Good to see you.
Good, nice to see you, huh?
Two, a journalist President Trump had time to stop and talk to, Piers Morgan. In clips released ahead of the full interview to be broadcast on Monday, Morgan asks Trump about the time he retweeted fake racist news posted by the anti-Muslim group Britain First.
I don't want to cause any difficulty for your country, that I can tell you.
Can I get an apology out of you just for the retweets of Britain
Well, if you're
First?
telling me...
I think it would go a long way.
Then here's what's fair. If you're telling me there's a horrible people, horrible racist people, I would certainly apologize if you'd like me to do that. I know nothing about them.
And you would disavow yourself of people like that?
I don't want to be involved with people, but you're telling me about these people because I know nothing about these people.
Which raises two questions. Was that an apology? And has the president heard of Google searches? So, you can learn quite a lot from the president just walking into a meeting with the global elite. Here's one you might have missed, though. In the scrum, a journalist hands the president a folded copy of the Swiss newspaper Der Blick. The folded front page says, "Welcome to Switzerland." The president seems pleased and autographs it. If he'd unfolded the paper, would have seen the full page spread, a request to call a specially dedicated hotline, where he'd have gotten through to a Swiss journalist who wanted to ask him a series of questions, including, do you tweet all by yourself? And did the Russians help you in your election campaign? We called the number today. The journalist told us he was still waiting for the president to ring. He'll be waiting some time. Robert Mueller will not.
Well, I'm joined now from New York by Ian Bremmer, who's a foreign policy expert and president of the Eurasia Group, a consulting firm which analyses global political risk. He seems to have gone down reasonably well with the global elite. But when he says America first does not mean America alone, does he mean it?
No, not really. I mean, he's not an isolationist, if that's what you're asking. He's a unilateralist. And so as long as you go along with what Trump wants, he's more than happy to work with other countries. But you have to find out exactly what he wants. It's not always easy to parse that. And it does mean breaking a lot of existing multilateral architecture. I mean, it's not as if now that Trump has given this speech, and most of his foreign policy speeches have gone down reasonably well, or as well, I would say. It's not like he's suddenly going to sign up for the Paris Climate Accord. He's not going to rejoin the Trans-Pacific Partnership. He's not going to take away his decision to put an embassy in Jerusalem. He's not going to rejoin UNESCO. If anything, Trump's been one of the very few things that have divided the that have united the globalists at Davos this year, united them against him.
So he doesn't want to have a fight when he's there in the room with them, so he behaves well, is what you're saying?
Well, not only that, I mean, usually he did have some booze when he talked about fake news, but he's been remarkably restrained. I mean, even in the context of his foreign visits, his tweets in the 48 hours that he's been in Davos have actually been as if they've been written by an entirely different person, and I'm sure they have been. He literally hasn't said or done anything unpresidential aside from that fake news comment in 2 entire days. There's no way that will continue. But as far as these headlines go right now, the headlines he's making at Davos have been fairly anodyne.
Are you sure he isn't becoming more presidential?
Yes, I'm quite sure of that. We can get back in touch on Monday, and I'm sure we'll have that conversation.
And to what extent do you think that there's deflection going on? I mean, there always seems to be some of that in a Trump PR strategy. That he doesn't want to talk about what's going on at home with the Mueller investigation and the headlines on the front of the New York Times.
Well, it's good that he's focusing on some of the headlines back here in the United States. I mean, the fact that the U.S. economy is doing quite well, the Dow with record after record, unemployment top-line numbers comparatively low, and growth improving. Christine Lagarde, who was opening Davos this year, and the IMF, no great fan of the Trump administration, said, yes, indeed, Trump's tax policies are part of the reason that we expect greater growth in the U.S. the global economy. And Trump's speech at Davos was well characterized to focus on America being open for business, America being a good economy to invest in. And to the extent that you have anyone saying nice things about Trump in Davos this year, it's a bunch of corporate CEOs who are very happy with this tax plan and delighted that the economy for now is doing quite well.
What about his apology?
Does he want to talk about the Mueller investigation? No.
What about his apology over those tweets? What do you think is going on there? I mean, what it seemed to me watching it was he likes being liked. And if he's talking to somebody who he thinks likes him, and he knows that Piers Morgan likes him, he will give a little. I mean, is there a lesson there for the world in how to deal with Trump?
Sure. I mean, the fact that Klaus Schwab, decided to put a Swiss military band, there right before Trump. He wouldn't do that for Xi Jinping or any other leader. It's a very non-Davos, non-Swiss German thing to do, but it makes Trump happy. It's not hard to give him a little like that. But let's be clear, Trump didn't say anything about the racist message of Britain First, which he did approve. It's just the organization himself, which he didn't know anything about. So it wasn't much of an apology. When he gives, he doesn't give much. Let's be clear on that.
Ian Bremer, thank you very much indeed for joining us. Well, let's go to Davos now and Ryan Heath, who's been following the World Economic Forum daily for Politico Europe. Ryan, were the global elite a bit starstruck?
Yes, I think there is a real divide in the camps here. There are people who can't decide whether they want a selfie with Donald Trump or whether they want to boo him when he is addressing them or moving through the crowds here. Probably it also splits down the lines of the economic, finance, tech crowd and then the more purely political crowd. Those with the money are more open to Trump, and they're already seeing some of it via his tax reforms. And the more pure politics and civil society people, they're never really going to be convinced by him.
But when you see him walking in the room or walking up the stairs and everybody's stopping there, sort of taking pictures on their phones, it all looks a bit pathetic.
Yes, well, this is the Las Vegas of politics and policy making, basically. It's always interesting and fascinating, but it's rarely substantial, and that's what you saw when people whipped out their phones. But what was very different in that scene was just how quiet people were. They weren't really cheering him, they weren't really booing him, they just wanted to be part of the spectacle. And that really plays into Trump's hands. He's a showman, and so he likes having everyone wrapped around his fingers, and that's essentially what happened for most of this week here.
When it came to the speech itself, I mean, he didn't get a rapturous response, but apart from the journalists, when he had a go at them, they weren't exactly booing either. So, you know, what was it overall as a feel?
Well, there was laughter and a little bit of condescension when the speech began, when you saw that military band, when you saw Trump fumbling on the stage and Klaus Schwab, the head of the World Economic Forum, sucking up a little bit to Trump, let's be frank. But they were neutralized during a lot of the speech. If you're someone who doesn't like Trump, then you've got the best version of Trump you're ever going to get in this speech today. So people essentially thought that he did exceed their expectations. It's probably not going to move the dial or change who's going to vote or not vote for him, but he did most of what he wanted to do today.
Ryan Heath, thank you very much indeed for joining us. So, did Donald Trump try to fire the special prosecutor, Robert Mueller? That's the story on the front of the New York Times. And what does that mean for the independence of that judicial process? I'm joined from Washington, D.C. now by Lisa Gilbert, Vice President of Legislative Affairs at the government watchdog Public Citizen. Now, the Times story says they've got 4 sources. So if it's true that the president ordered the firing of the special prosecutor and then didn't go ahead with it because he was stopped by his own White House counsel, what does that mean for whether Donald Trump was trying to obstruct justice?
It means that he was, and that he was not successful because his counsel, Don McGahn, saw what it would look like, knew it was impossible for him to proceed, and threatened to resign if Trump moved ahead. It adds lots of weight to the theory that many have postulated that Trump will do anything to stop this investigation. But
he won't have broken any law by that. He won't have actually obstructed justice by that, will he? So it doesn't take anyone any closer to impeachment.
It may not take us closer to impeachment, but it does take us closer to an understanding of Trump's mentality, which is always a hard thing to get. We know that over time he's done a number of things, whether it's pressuring Comey to go light on Flynn, whether it's the actual Comey firing, or whether it is this story that he wanted to remove Robert Mueller, which obviously would be hugely problematic. All of it shows that he's acutely aware that the walls are in some ways closing in on this investigation and wants to do what he can to remove himself from the crosshairs.
I mean, he, of course, point blank denies it, says it's fake news.
This is true, but that is his robust defense of anything where he doesn't have an answer. So I don't think that tells us that it didn't happen, only that he doesn't want to talk about it.
I mean, if he had done it, or even the fact that, or not the allegation that he wanted to do it, how extraordinary a move would that have been? Where would that have left any investigation into what happened during the election?
I mean, it would be incredibly extraordinary. It would be taking us to the same posture we were in Watergate. It would be a president who is trying not to be investigated, who thinks he is above the law, which is something no American is. And I think the outrage would have been incredible. And certainly from our perspective, where we are robustly trying to protect the Mueller investigation so it can come to a conclusion and Americans can know what happened, whether there was collusion and how Russians interfered in our elections, it would be massively problematic for democracy itself.
How vital is it that Trump is questioned by Mueller himself? And what happens if he just refuses?
Right. You know, I think it's hard to say without being inside the investigation what exactly Mueller needs to string the lines together and come up with his theory and understand what truly happened. But certainly from the outside, we think he should be able to investigate anybody he wants. That includes the president. And we need to better understand who knew what collusion actually occurred, and how Russia was involved.
Lisa Gilbert, thank you very much for joining us.